everyone. Appreciate jumping online. I know it's towards the end of the day in Asia and into the evening in Australia. So we've seen, there's a few people from all over the world here. So we appreciate you jumping on wherever you are. But this is the online M&A series, and it's the second one we've done, but wanted to dive into some subjects that both buyers and sellers and our Flippa community might find interesting and educational. So if you have any particular subjects you want to hear from, we'll give you the contact info at the end to make any suggestions. Okay, so just start off with a quick overview. So what we're talking about today, we'll dive into a little bit about who is Flippa, what we do, who am I and what I do. And then we're going to be talking about a 7-figure exit that I successfully brokered. So we're going to dive into the business, the broker process, the negotiation, due diligence, and the learnings from that. So we'll kind of walk you through the timeline of what happened, the story behind the actual exit, and hopefully you'll be able to understand one exit process. They're all extremely different. There's no black and white in M&A. It's all depends on the buyers and the sellers and the business and that sort of stuff. But this gives you a really good overview of what happens, the timeline, and maybe some challenges we overcame, and how we overcame those, and maybe what not to do if you're considering an exit as well. Okay. So who is Flippa? So we are the largest M&A online platform. So we sell businesses from your content sites, your e-commerce, which are, your SaaS businesses that are more traditional online businesses, to YouTube channels, podcasts, social media, businesses that are maybe up and coming or a little more unconventional. So if it's got a URL, we would sell it, and we do have the largest global buyer base. So I'm confident that if the business is in a good position and it's ready to be sold, then we have the buyer for it. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that today. So we use, expertise from our business brokers. So we have a global broker team. So we have a couple here in the APAC region, which is where I am. We also have a Europe team and some brokers in our US office as well. So, because we are working at a scale, and we do have both technology and our human team, we do negotiate and receive offers quite quickly, which you will see in the timeline that we go through today. And that is because scale. So we're breaking the mold of a traditional broker who might just look through their Rolodex and their network. There's nothing wrong with that. But because we have the tech to be able to reach out to our global network and our team to be able to work amongst ourselves internally, we can negotiate and receive offers very quickly, based on what it would traditionally take. We have integrated legal, insurance, and payments. So if you're on the platform, you can do a deal from start to finish on the platform. So we do that to help keep it safe. We do it to make sure that the process goes smoothly. And of course, our Flippa Pay, I'll kind of talk about that briefly later, but that is very important to making sure that you as a seller get your money and you as a buyer get the business that you paid for. We have technology, our AI buyer matching tool that is first in the industry. So we have basically our machine learning and AI tools that understand a buyer's behavior and understand what their criteria is, and send your business, if you're a seller, send it to them and say, hey, based on what you've been looking at, this is the business for you. And so that also goes back to negotiating and receiving offers fast, because we have that technology to be able to get the right businesses in front of the right buyers, and get your business sold. And then our benchmarking and comparison insights. So the market ebbs and flows, it changes. We have the insights of what's happening right now. They're live, they're based on 15 years of data. So we have all this for our community to use. Really quickly, I'm not going to spend much time on who I am, because it's not about me today, but I'm a senior M&A broker. I have been helping businesses exit for 3 years with Flippa, and I've done or supported hundreds of exits, I should say. Our team, we've got business brokers from, that have come from investment banking, that have come from sales backgrounds. So we have a very vast network of our business brokers. And like I said, they're global. So yeah, I am just one. And like I said, I work within our APAC region. Okay, so this process, I kind of wanted to just give you an overview of what the steps are that we're going to be working through today with the particular business that we have. So you can see, based on the steps that we've got, based on the steps that we've got the valuation, listing process, finding your buyers, negotiating, due diligence, and the transaction finalization. So that's what we're going to kind of run through today with the business that we're working through. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce the business that we're working with today. Daytrace Buy. So this business, the owner, it's an interesting story. So Hugh came to us through word of mouth. He was speaking to someone, and he was close to retirement, and he was kind of saying, I'll shut down this 14-year-old business. And the person he was speaking to said, have you considered selling? You've got 14 years old business, it's profitable, it's got clients, it's doing really well. Why would you just let it fizzle out? Because that's what Hugh thought he would need to do. And so he came through our valuation tool, just kind of said, what can I get for this business? And was connected with me as his business broker. So I had a chat with Hugh, and he was quite skeptical at start. He said, no one's going to buy my business. So going into it, quite a skeptic on, what Flippa was, the business being sold, and how I could help him find a buyer. But the facts we'll kind of run through of Daytrace Buy. So it was an owner-operator business. So Hugh was had started this business as a founder, and he was doing the day-to-day operations. His son helped him out occasionally, but he was pretty much running the business himself. It was a service business. So what Daytrace Buy does is it is an online course for people to learn how to trade day trading. So Hugh would do live trades of his own. He'd been doing this for quite a number of years, and he'd lost some and he'd won some, made some money on it. So he decided, why not make this a course and teach people? Every day he'd jump on Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. and take them through some live trading. So it was creating a community. They were doing live trading together. He was teaching them how to do it. He'd put out content. So yes, very heavily focused around creating a community. 90% US client base, 60% of it was recurring revenue, digital product purchases, so e-learning books, additional resources that he sold. The Trailing 12 months, so TTM, trailing 12 months, revenue, $372,379. So anytime we're speaking today, it's going to be in USD. And the average monthly page views is 3,408. To give you a bit of an understanding about the site, and hopefully you can see the site in your window now, but this is Day Trade Spy. You can see, yeah, very educational website, and you'll have the link there to kind of learn a little bit more about it later if you wanted to. Jumping into the valuation. So day one, I'm chatting with you. We're talking about the business, what's a benefit, what's maybe a challenge that we're going to face, and how we're going to value that. So the positives, as you saw, 14-year-old business. So it's been running for 14 years old. It is shown stability throughout those years. It's shown that its community lasts that long. So it's good age on it. Something buyers really, they value quite high. Recurring revenue, majority of it was recurring revenue. So that is always a really exciting thing for buyers to see. It's easy to predict in the future that recurring revenue is going to be there next year, or something similar. So that was obviously a positive. High profit margin. Outside of a salary, the business is pretty easy as far as to maintain. There's maybe a few web expenses, but there's not a whole lot of additional costs for inventory, or obviously from a brick and mortar. With digitals, you don't have any other kind of capital and expenses around physical locations. Some e-commerce, you might see that as well with a warehouse or something like that. So typically a service and SaaS type businesses are going to have that high profit margin. So untapped marketing opportunities. So there was really, he didn't do a lot. This was a passion project for him. So he wasn't out there on Instagram, putting out reels about the courses. He wasn't putting up Google ads or anything like that. So someone with some expertise in that area could see the gap there and see how that could scale it. Hugh was willing to stay on. So that's something, depending on a seller's reason for exiting the business. Some of them are not willing to stay on, cannot stay on. So because he was looking at retirement, he was available to stay on for a period of time, taper off, and that is obviously a positive as well. And he had a scalable business. Like I said, there's no constrictions on warehouse availability. There's no constrictions on suppliers with how much they can make of a product. This is a digital product. Really, all you need in order to scale the business is the community to grow. Challenges. So you saw the website there, and I'm sure you saw Hugh plastered everywhere. Hugh is the brand. People go to this community because Hugh is the expert. Without Hugh, there is no Day Trade Spy. So that was a real challenge for us, and something that would come up with a lot of buyers and their concern. It's employee dependent. So someone has to get onto the website or the lesson each day at 9 a.m., sorry, and be teaching the community that there is about the Day Trade Spies and how to trade and things like that. So it is literally someone jumping on a webinar every single day. He cannot have a sick day. And then it's a highly volatile industry. So we'll kind of talk about this later, but as the market, kind of shifts, people are a little less interested in trading. So they're going to save their money a little bit. They're going to pull back on trading in investments. So that does affect the business as well. Here's just to kind of show, one of the biggest challenges that we came across was Hugh is the brand. This is Hugh, plastered on all the videos. You know, he's signing off on a lot of the wording and the copy on the website. So just an example there. Okay, so day 8, and you'll see if you haven't kind of noticed the little timeline here. So day 8, we are listing day trade SPY for sale. So how did we come to the valuation of 1.6 million? So like I said, it did have a recurring revenue of 60%. And it is quite a predictable P&L based on what we'd seen year over year. You'll see some slight growth in the 2021 to 2022, but it was growing year over year. So, you know, quite predictable, quite steady. The operating expenses were quite low. Good, strong trailing 12 months revenue for the size of the business. And the comparable data, when we compared it to other businesses, to the market, to what we were seeing at that time, and this is back in 2022, the valuation that we came to was 4.6 adjusted profit multiple. So adjusted profit means it's seller discretionary earnings, or it's EBITDA. It's taking out, you know, the cars that maybe snuck into the expenses, or the travel, or all the expenses that aren't operating expenses. So once we adjusted that out, we looked at the market. We said 4.6 based on what it was. I must admit, it was high for the market at the time, but we put it at 1.6. So okay, next. So identifying possible buyers. At this time, I was brokering the process. So that meant I was owning the listing. It was under my name. I was qualifying the buyers. I was doing the work. You had kind of put it in my hands and said, all right, let's find a buyer. So I want to kind of show you the extent of our reach. So we're onboarding 20,000 buyers a month to Flippa. Not all of these buyers will be relevant to the business, like to day trade SPY. So it is my job as the broker to put the business in front of the right people, and to qualify those people that are interested, and qualifying their interest level. How interested are they? And qualifying their, you know, what their background is. So do they come from a marketing background, a business background, you know, sales background? Where do they kind of fit? And then understanding their financial situation. So will they need some lending source? Do they have investors backing them? And then do they have cash? We do this so that we can prioritize buyers. It's not necessarily to disqualify buyers. I do not like when we disqualify people too quickly, because I have seen something, you know, I've seen sales where I didn't necessarily put the buyer and seller together, and they've been successful and gone through. So I don't like to disqualify buyers too quickly, but I like to understand them fully so that we can prioritize them and understand the likelihood of the deal going through. So as a broker, we are marketing out the listing. So by day 35, we had 5,753 views of the listing. We had 192 people that were watching it. So they've clicked it and said, I like it, but maybe it's valued a little too high for me. I'm just going to watch this and see if they come down in price. And when I announce that we've updated financial information, or we've updated the price, maybe it's come down, they will get alerted so that they can come back. Of those 192 that said, I like this, 168 reached out to me as the listing owner and said, I would love to talk to you about this further. So it's my job to narrow these down and qualify each of these buyers through phone calls, through Zoom calls, through messaging, to understand, like I said, those three things: their interest level, their expertise to buy this and resources to manage it, and their financial situation. And for day trade SPY, I qualified 168 people down to 2 and set up discovery calls with Hugh. So is between these phases is when I will introduce them to the seller. And the real benefit is if this was not brokered, Hugh would be doing all this. So that is a lot for someone who doesn't necessarily have the expertise to know how to qualify a buyer, or the practice of figuring out if a buyer is fully qualified or not. And it's quite time consuming. So that is one of the things that's beneficial about including a buyer. So requested information from buyers, I put this in here to kind of understand, so you can understand what do buyers ask when we're qualifying them and when they're showing interest in a business. So they look for traffic, Google Analytics access, and client profiles. So Google Analytics is a really great universal way to show how the traffic is coming to a business. You can give read-only access to people. So that's what we would do with a qualified buyer. The client profile, that's how big are the clients, how, where are they geographically dispersed? Are they enterprise clients? Are they small business owners? Are they individuals? Understanding all this helps a buyer make a decision, is this the right business for them? Similarly, financial, number of people per subscription model, helps us understand, how much is the person worth, essentially, or the client worth, their LTV, the churn. These are all to understand that subscription model, is it predictable for the next year? And then marketing. What have they done? What are their open rates, click rates, conversion rates, return on ad spend? So all these quantifying data is how buyers make a decision if a business is in line with the market, priced in line with the market, if it has gaps where they can maybe fill, such as marketing, and if it's worth them, jumping on a discovery call with that seller. So I do want to jump into, you'll see 2 discovery calls there, and we only have 1 buyer at the end of the sale. So why did the discovery call lead to a buyer getting disqualified? The first discovery call we had was with a private equity company, and they really liked the business. In fact, I've got a quote here that kind of explains that their concerns. They liked the business, but they saw too much risk in it for the valuation. So they couldn't justify the valuation for the risk it was for them. So they said, the fact that this business is a personal branded business, we do not know how current customers will react once the change is made. And it will be too late to go back at this point. So they are saying, this brand is all Hugh. These customers come to day trade SPY for Hugh. If they quickly change to their branding, to their new employee, they don't know if these people will react well or not. So that's a high risk investment for them, and they just could not justify the 1.6 million or close to that for that. Okay, just check there's no questions. I don't think so, not at this stage. Feel free to pop them in. We will have time at the end. Okay, so we're at day 45. So up here, day 45. So we want to understand who the buyer is that actually went through, and what was the offer. So the buyer was a financial media company. So they were also based in the US, and they had other assets. One of them included Generational Wealth Financial Newsletter. So they were a strategic buyer. So what do I mean by a strategic buyer? you really have three types of buyers on the Flippa platform. You have the side hustler. That's someone that's typically going to buy something a little bit smaller and then build it up into, whether it's a side hustle or maybe they want it to eventually take over their main job. They're not typically going to look for something of this size. I have had a couple that have gone into the millions, but they're typically looking under 1 million. You're then going to, once you're at the 7-figure size, you're going to start looking into your strategic buyer and your private equity, high net worth individuals, family offices, people that maybe have a couple of businesses that they want to roll up another one into. So the strategic buyer type, label, that in this case, the buyer was looking to build a course for trading, a financial type course, to cross market with their already, the community they'd already created of people looking for financial information and financial learnings and seeking that out. So they were actually already having internal talks about building this type of platform, but then came across Flippa on their Flippa searches, just came across Day Trade Spy, which was a 14-year-old business that already had a community, already profitable. So for them, they were looking at this as well, why don't we buy versus build? So it proved in their case to be a good investment for them because they can cross-market it with their other assets. And then the cost of building something like this is pretty substantial, quite substantial, and then you would have to market it and build the community. So to them, where the other party saw 1.6 million as it's too high of a risk and too high of a valuation, this strategic buyer saw, because of their situation, saw it as reasonable. They did understand that there is some risk associated with it, the same concerns as other buyers had. So 20 days after our first discovery call with them, they came to us with an offer of $1 million cash at closing and a $600,000 earnout. For the total price the seller could get was anywhere from $1 million to $1.6 million. So an earnout, for those that aren't familiar, an earnout is where you will get paid a tier payment based on the business hitting certain KPI. I would say in almost all my deals of revenue, you typically don't want to go profit because there's can be some manipulation with costs involved there. So you typically, if you're looking at earnouts, you want to look at KPIs on and milestones of revenue. So we're at day 45. So a month and a half into first conversation with you, we have our offer. Okay, just making sure there's no question. All right. So I want to talk about what we negotiated once we got this offer, because we didn't negotiate on the price. And there's a couple of reasons why. The price, I think, if we remember back, it was a 4.6 multiple on adjusted profit. That was that was on the high end of the market for the time. So Hugh was very happy with the opportunity to earn 1.6 million. The earnout helped the seller get to his potential of 1.6 million, but it also helped the buyer only pay the extra $600 as long as the business was going. So it took into consideration the risk there. So Hugh was happy with the price and the structure of the payment. What he did want to negotiate, so initially those earnouts were paid on an annual basis. He wanted to get his money a little bit quicker, so it was on quarterly. So we negotiated that to turn to a quarterly payout. He also wanted access to the accounting, just to make sure that, there's obviously a lot of trust there. They had built a lot of trust over the time, but remember, they've only known each other for about a month. So Hugh said, I'll agree to the earnout as long as I can see everything that's coming in and out of the business and make sure that the revenue is as reported. And then the KPIs for marketing and his consulting role. So he wanted to be involved in the decisions, particularly in the marketing, because it's he's essentially giving the business over to them and with an earnout and saying, as long as you grow this business, then I'll get my money. So Hugh said, all right, together we negotiated, all right, we're happy to give you over the business and put it in your hands to grow the business, but you have to commit that you will spend X amount on marketing and do X amount of marketing tasks so that we're in a position to earn our earnout. What we did not negotiate. So we didn't negotiate on the price. The seller wasn't in a hurry for his cash, so we didn't negotiate that earnout structure to be any shorter or anything like that. And then the reason being is, it's like I said, Hugh wasn't in a hurry. And then obviously for tax purposes, sometimes pacing out the payments, whether it's seller financing, earnout, delayed balloon payments, whatever it is, sometimes for tax purposes, that can be beneficial. And then, like I said before, the earnout structure actually helped achieve a higher valuation than what the buyer had valued the business at. Okay, so we're moving into due diligence. So day 60 we're at. What due diligence, we were, I guess the analogy I like to use for due diligence is when they're prior to this part of the process, prior to the offer, they're just looking under the hood of the car. They're kind of checking out the car from the outside. They're saying this is a nice car. Once we get to this point, they're lifting up that hood, they're pulling apart the engine, they're looking at all the nuts and bolts of how the car goes together, how it works. So it's the same thing as the business. We're opening up everything to see how the business works. There's, of course, some things that we do not share until the business is actually transferred and the payment has been put into escrow. That includes client data. That includes the full tech of the business, and some accounts and things like that you can keep private. But typically what a due diligence entails is the data room. That is your documents, read-only access to things, technical due diligence, legal and financial due diligence. You will likely, at a deal this size, include third parties such as accountants and lawyers. That does come at an extra cost. So, for example, in this deal, that was one of the things that we had to work around, because back and forth when we were doing the sales purchase agreement review down here, there was some back and forth on the wording and jurisdictions and things like that, but both parties didn't actually want to get their lawyers on a call because that costs money, but it was slowing everything down. So I just said, all right, can we all agree that we'll jump on for 1 hour? We've got a strict criteria of the points we need to get through in that time. And we were able to do that and move on nice and quickly. So sometimes it does make sense to everyone to get on a call, even though it costs money, because it will move the steps forward at a quicker pace. back up here, shareholders, are there other shareholders involved? In this case, there were not. It was very easy. We were between two decision makers. And so it was quite a smooth process. Actually, on the buy side, we did have an additional shareholder, but he was easily to access. I've had it where shareholders that have gone on holiday at the time of closing have slowed things down, or I've had a deal that had over 10 shareholders. So that gets complex in that aspect as well. So just understanding that will help understand the due diligence process and the timeline. An asset sale versus a share sale. So asset sale is typically going to be a little bit quicker because the due diligence will not need to go too far into legal, any liabilities, anything like that. If you're taking over the whole company, but in this example, you're taking over 14 years. So anything that happened 10 years ago, the new buyer could be liable for. So in that instance, they're going to go into due diligence a lot more in depth than they would an asset sale, where if they take the assets, they will not take the history of the business. Oops, too quick. Employment or consulting agreements. In this case, there was that. So Hugh needed to negotiate his salary, you need to negotiate time, everything you would do as a normal employee. Your escrow agent, you need to get them involved. We have our Flippa Pay, so that is, accessible from our platform. It's very smooth process, and it's safe for basically the buyer will credit the account, the trust fund, the transfer of assets that will occur, and then the funds will be released. So it's very important to have an escrow agent to ensure the safety of the funds and the transaction. And then understand the closing schedule, make sure everyone's on the same page about when it's actually going to close. So 15 days it took for Daytrace Buy to do their due diligence. That is actually fairly quick, particularly for a 7-figure business. So most buyers are going to look at a 30 to 60 day exclusivity period where you say, I agree to sell to you, and I agree to give you 60 days, 30 days, whatever it is, and I won't talk to any other buyers. So anything longer than that, that's getting quite lengthy. To have a 7-figure deal with a 60-day exclusivity period due diligence, that they should be able to get the due diligence done by then. So what did they find for Daytrace Buy? You've probably read this already while I was rambling on, but they found that the monthly revenue had decreased. Hugh had actually had in his mind that the deal was done. So at this stage, he said, we've signed a letter of intent, which is a non-binding document. And he said, Fiona, you found a buyer, you've done a fantastic job. I'm going to kick back a little bit. I'm not going to do the normal promotion I would do at this time of year. I'm not going to add the additional courses and sell the additional courses I would have normally sold. And so his monthly revenue decreased from anywhere from, he was doing 35,000 to 45,000 a month. It decreased down to 17 to 25. So very significant. The economy also slowed down a little bit at this time. So we were mid-COVID, trading was exciting. It was people were at home that were starting to look at other ways to make money or to, hobbies. And Daytrace Buy had ridden the wave of that. The economy was starting to slow down. Confidence in the stability of the market was lessening. And so what's the first thing to go is the additional investments or the scariness of a volatile market. So those couple of things caused the business to slow down a little bit, and we had to renegotiate. We went from $1 million at closing to $600,000 at closing. The earnout structure changed to a tiered payout where you basically would get a percentage based of the additional 1 million. So there was still a total of 1.6 million. And we just flipped it. And he would get a tiered payout of if it got 70% to the goal, he would get 70% of that. If it got 80%, he would get 80% of that $1 million. So 600,000 from 1.6 million is not a huge percentage up front. But because of some, I guess, findings, we had to make that adjustment. Did we get the deal done? We did. So a 4.6 multiple at, sorry, I'll just jump into a couple of questions that were a little bit relevant to the other screen. So, all right. What does SBA qualified tag mean in the listing on Flippa? So SBA qualified, SBA is a loan that is available to US-based businesses. So Day Trade Spy was a US-based business. You will not see it available over this side of the world. There are other alternative lending partners for this side of the world. They typically tend to be quite high in interest rates, particularly at the moment. SBA qualified businesses can typically get a lower interest rate on their loan, and but it is only a US-based option. Who pays for the accountants and lawyers? Buyer or seller? Separate sides. So each side will have their own lawyer and typically their own accountants helping them. So you pay for your side. When we come to escrow fees and things like that, most people split that. So they'll say, hey, Flippa pay is X amount. We're going to split that. Or often the buyer will negotiate it in that they will cover the costs of the escrow payments. The Flippa success fee, that is taken from the seller side typically, unless the buyer says we will cover that as well. And I have had that negotiated in. No deposit taken. No. So no deposit is typically taken in these deals. I have had a couple that have, but typically no. Is clicky for analytics sufficient for a sale? Sorry, my window can't see the rest of that question. Bear with me. Can't see the rest of that. I can't see the rest of that question, Alan, sorry, but depends what it shows. So clicky, as long as it provides, like I said, the customer profile, if it's a churn, just certain metrics, then it should be enough. A dashboard that shows that is going to be typically, it's going to be enough to show the buyer. What they like to see is a platform showing it, not a spreadsheet, not something that can be manipulated. So as long as it's showing the sufficient analytics of what they're asking for, then it should work. Okay, so the deal got done. Yes, as you can see, the deal got done. Why did it work? So we've touched on it a couple of times. The buyer saw the value in the business, and they saw the value because of their situation, and they could see that to add Day Trade Spy to their portfolio of very similar businesses, it would help grow their portfolio of businesses, their network, their community. They would make more money. The other buyer could not see that value and therefore did not move forward. The buyer had someone to take over the daily operation. So this is the first time I'm mentioning it, but throughout the process, they started introducing a guy called Aaron. And Aaron started to take the daily discussions and the daily lessons alongside Hugh. So the community that Hugh had been working with for 14 years will eventually, and they're still working on this, will eventually learn to trust Aaron and have Hugh kind of phase out. So that kind of goes into the next point of the seller was willing to stay on and consult. So if Hugh has said, I need to get out of this, I need to leave, I'm not well, I've got other priorities, this would not have worked. That would have been a deal breaker for almost all buyers. And then Hugh was flexible on the terms of the deal to get the valuation he was asking for. So if he had said, Fiona, I need the deal to be all cash and I need the money now, we would not have got $1.6 million. So in order to get the valuation that he wanted, or to get what was, considered a pretty nice multiple, Hugh needed to be flexible with his terms, and he needed to take on some of that risk. So as you can tell, we successfully completed the earnout. Their business grew. It completed all the milestones that it was required to earn that additional $1 million. And Hugh had successfully sold his business for $1.6 million. Okay, so what did we learn from this? So specifically to day trade SPY, one of the biggest mistakes you did, or that happened, was taking a step back from the business during the selling process. So that just, you cannot believe that the deal is done until the money is in your bank account as a seller, or until the assets are in your hand as a buyer. There is so many variables that can change and that things can happen, that until you're at that closed point, then the business is not sold and the deal is not done. So taking a step back and kind of sitting back thinking that the deal was done was one of the bigger mistakes. Working with the lawyers, that did slow things down. Lawyers tend to go back and forth a little bit slower than the urgency that we were looking for. They're obviously, they've got their client's best interest at the time, so sometimes they can butt heads, and the best thing we found was to just jump on a call. Communication is so much more softer in real time, real person, than it is over email. And just a whole lot more was achieved. We moved forward and got it sorted that day. In other deals, a couple of other learnings throughout the process is people made changes to the businesses, drastic changes. They tried things, they stopped their ads, they just made changes that caused the revenue to dip. So that's going to cause a renegotiation. Poor reporting, they didn't have the available information. And then buyers cannot make a educated decision on the valuation or the risks of the business. Disqualifying buyers too quickly, I mentioned this earlier. You don't necessarily want to disqualify a buyer unless they seem like they are not ethical. Then you just want to kind of rank them, prioritize them, and make a decision if you want to work with them. Being too inflexible on deal terms, particularly in the market we're in today, you need to consider additional creative ways to make a deal go through if you do want a higher valuation. Not using escrow service, I've touched on this a couple of times, and not consulting a professional. I'm not saying you need to sign up with me here today. I'm just saying you need to have professionals when you're working through this process, because it is not black and white, because so much can happen. And it is just better to have a third party that is not emotionally involved in the process. So just some advice from Hugh. It taught him always keep an open mind as opportunities arise when you can least expect them, because this did come out of the blue from him, and they're his words. Just a quote, even if you don't want to sell, it's worth a chat. You might be shocked at the value and opportunity, like I was, and sell when you're at your high to get the most value. It seems like there is a buyer out there for everything. So I think that kind of really sums up the story we've told today about how Hugh didn't even really consider selling. He learnt the lesson of needing to sell when your business is doing well and not take that foot off the gas. And of course, finding a buyer that Hugh himself was pretty shocked about. You can read his perspective of this story in our blog post here. So it talks through how he came to build Day3Spy, what his decision was to sell it, and from his perspective, how the process went. So I am available for questions, for consultations, for valuations anytime. So you will get this deck, so you'll be able to grab my email and my calendar there. If you do want to learn more about Flippa or view our listings, our website's there. We have the live data insights, which I'll just show you really quickly here, which show you, the search intent, the trending terms, the profit multiples, our buyer liquidity, all sorts of things there, and then our success stories and blog posts there. We do have a referral program, and I do want to tease something that I'm very, very excited about is we're actually going on the road in Asia for a 6-city roadshow in September and October. So that is going to be announced this week. I'm super excited for that. So with that, do we have any questions? Oops. I would just see if I can get my question box up. Sorry, yeah. Chat. Trying to find the chat. There we go. Okay, so we do have a few here. What happens if a deal doesn't go through in terms of sunk fees, broken deal costs? So yes, so there are in some LOIs that there are broken deals, like a breakup clause. So if you have spent X amount on due diligence, then there can be a broken fee cost there that will cover that due diligence, because due diligence does cost money. As I mentioned, you've got your lawyers, accountants, some people hire like tech experts to look into the actual tech. So there can be a breakup clause in there, where depending on who breaks it up has to pay a fee. I have seen that in a few instances. How does the seller ensure that the phased payments are actually done because the buyer is getting the asset in closing itself? Okay, so I'll answer that question first. Thank you. So that is where I mentioned one of the things we negotiated in for Hugh is that he was still involved in the business. He had access to all their accounting, so he could see how much revenue that they were earning to say, hey, you've hit that milestone, you now owe me X amount of money. And they've obviously got that relationship that they worked through, and that wasn't an issue. But they do have the legal clauses in the sales purchase agreement that legally the business owes them that money. You can also have clauses written in, not with earnouts, because earnouts are based on revenue. So, I mean, you could still have the clause written in there, but it's less likely to be seen with seller financing, where seller financing is an agreed upon amount paid out per month, quarter, year, whatever it is, for easy math's sake, $10,000. So I sell my business to you, you're going to pay me $10,000 for the next 12 months. Then we can have a clause written in there where you have guaranteed that, and the guarantees are the business, there's personal guarantees, there's other business guarantees. So we can ensure that you're essentially, from a legal standpoint, covered. Okay. So, and for non-compete, yes. So often there's a non-compete clause for a couple of different. You've got one where, sorry, that's non-compete is typically for a couple of years. Really, it depends on the buyer and the seller's comfortability with it, what the seller has got going on. So we've had non-competes written into the sales purchase agreement where maybe I have sold my e-commerce store to you and I agree not to start another e-commerce store, but I have already got a pet e-commerce store there. So I exclude, pets.com from that exclusivity, from that non-compete, sorry. So we say excluding pets.com, I will not start any other or be involved in any other e-commerce business. So that is very common in your sales purchase agreement. Do profit forecasts that are the basis for the multiple typically include a proper salary for the owner? In the case of Day Trade Spy, the numbers suggested a rather low OPEX. Yes, so that's why we said adjusted profit, EBITDA, or seller discretionary earnings. So the salary for the director or the owner is excluded from the operating expenses. So if there had been two other employees, then they would have been included in the operating expenses, but the director or Hugh would not. This is pretty typical across the board, across the industry. However, I often have situations where it's owner operator, like I've got a business at the moment, it's owner operator, and he is quite heavily involved. He has a certain expertise. So we have taken, and he's been paying himself quite a hefty salary, as he should, a lot more than someone would get paid in his position. So we then substituted back in what it would cost to hire someone. And we do that because the thing you want to do is have a very transparent understanding of the business and expectations, so that a buyer does not come in and say, hang on, we've got to rearrange this whole P&L, and that changes the whole valuation, and we are so far apart on valuation. We want to get to pretty close, pretty standard understanding of what the market is operating at, and get a close valuation to where we're going. I think that is all the questions for now. Like I said, you'll get a copy of this webinar. You will be able to reach out to me with any questions. If you would like to hear about the Asia roadshow that we're going on, with events in 6 cities throughout Thailand, Vietnam, China, and Hong Kong, then please feel free to email me, and I'll make sure that you're first on the list to know when we release the sign up for that. But I know it's getting late in Australia and towards the evening here in Asia. So I really appreciate everyone's time. If you have any suggestions of other topics you want to see, I will be hosting another one of these next month, and I hope you all join. But appreciate everyone's time. Have a lovely night.